everybody. Welcome to the session. I'm your host, Justin Crosley, and happy to be back in the studio today. I'm always happy to be in the studio. Today is definitely no exception because I've got an old friend who I realized today when I was looking up when last on the show. I've known for like 18 years now. And I didn't even know the whole story about your brewing history since the first time you were on the show until now. I've got Craig Cowles from Morgan Territory on the show tonight, and welcome, Craig.
Well, thank you very much.
It's great to have you. Along with Craig he's the brewmaster at Morgan Territory Brewing Company, and his head brewer, James Noah. First time meeting you, James. Welcome to the studio.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
It's great to have you guys. And we're going to talk about so much stuff today, but one of the reasons I was reminded that I haven't spoken to you on the show in a while is, we always stream the Great American Beer Festival Awards, and man, I saw you walk up there like 3 times this year. You guys killed it at the GABF.
Yeah, it's really exciting. Sometimes the stars align and you're just along for the ride. So it's really gratifying, especially when you get that first medal early on. Yeah. You can kind of relax.
Right.
A couple years ago at the World Beer Cup when we won for the gold for the Hoptomic, it was our last entry, and you're kind of you're nervous, and the gold medal is the last medal they announced. They announced the bronze, the silver, and then the gold.
Sure, it's your literal last chance.
Right, and we were sitting in the bar, and it was pretty exciting. We all kind of exploded in excitement when they announced her name.
Well, and as I'm sure you know, after doing this for a while, and we're going to talk about your whole history, like just getting one medal of any color at the Great American Beer Festival is a huge accomplishment and a huge rush, I'm sure. So on a year like this, where, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you ran the bases. You got a bronze, a silver, and a gold.
Yes, we did.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. You get to try all of it. And like you alluded to, there's so many entries. The first year that I entered was back in 2004.
Okay.
That was the first year the JBF cracked 1,000 entries.
Oh, wow.
And this year we've been dancing, or the last couple of years, we've been dancing around 10,000 entries. So
that's amazing.
10 times as many entries. So it's definitely a lot more challenging to win those medals. It's pretty gratifying when you do get it called.
Of course. All right, well, we're going to talk about that. We're going to try the medal-winning beers. Before we get to that, I want to thank our sponsor, More Beer. You can go to morebeer.com and check out everything they do. Check out their Brew-Built line of jacketed conicals. They're super cool. I love them myself. Just go to their website, check out their deal of the day if you're looking to save some money. They've got everything you need for home brewing, and they've been doing it for 25 years, I think. So they really know what they're doing over there. They help professional brewers, too. So if you're looking for hops or equipment, go to morebeer.com and check it all out, and thank them for being a sponsor of this show. If you're looking to find some more Brewing Network content, don't forget Brew Strong. Jamil Zainasheff is still out there doing his wonderful show for us. He's been doing it for, I believe, 19 years also, and he just does a great job and still putting out awesome content, as well as Dr. Homebrew with JP and Brian Cooper. They're still putting out their wonderful show. Check out Dr. Homebrew, all here on the Brewing Network, and a brand new show. I put together a 10-episode series. In fact, I think the 10th episode goes out next week, and that's with Mare Island Brewing Company. They are celebrating their 10-year anniversary, and we put together just this cool 10-episode series about not just the Mare Island Brewing Company, but Mare Island itself. So it has a lot of naval history and U.S. history dating all the way back to World War I, and it's a pretty cool. I'm really proud of the podcast. So check out Battleships to Beer. Just search Brewing Network on whatever podcast aggregator you use, and you'll see Battleships to Beer there also. It's a good show, and it's just about to wrap up. 10 episodes plus a few bonus episodes in there, so give that a listen too. And finally, you can support us by doing your Amazon shopping or support any of our wonderful sponsors, including Blickman, Beersmith, 21st Amendment Brewery, and Grog Tag. Check them all out and thank them for supporting the show. All right, boys. Now we can focus on some of the beer. And that's where I want to start. We have Cushman in our glass, which I think was one of your medal winners, right?
Yes, that was the the bronze medal winner for Dortmunder.
Okay.
Although you'll see on Untapped or even on the label, we call it a Helles. It's because when we first...
I did see that.
Yes. When we first came out with it, it really didn't get much traction, even though it's a delicious beer, because people didn't know what Dortmunder is. And frequently they would think it's a darker beer or something just based on the name of it. So that's part of being a business owner, is trying to get beer into people's hands, necessarily. So, typically a Dortmunder is classically described as somewhere in between a Helles and a Pilsner, and probably leaning more towards the Helles side. So we just embrace that.
Does that mean it's so which I get confused with my Pilsners and my Helles. Pilsner is more firmly bitter than and a Helles would be a little softer.
Very is malt driven with just enough, barely enough hops to balance it.
Got it.
And
so the Dort is in between, you're saying,
right? Yeah. So you get a lot of the malt character that you'll get out of a Helles, but you have this nice little hop punch that makes it crisp. I can find Helleses a little soft sometimes.
Helli, yeah.
I know. If it existed.
Right.
But I found that the Dortmunder is like a Helles, but just a nice little crisp note from the bitterness that you get from it. So, and we use a Callista hop, which is kind of a noble adjacent hop that gives nice floral notes to it as well, with a Barca Weyermann Barca Pilsner. Okay. So
100%.
We use we use RO water as well.
Yeah.
We need to use a little acidulated and maybe a little carafoam to help with the body, but it's I'd say 98%.
Gotcha.
Barca Pilsner.
Just some little tweaks in there.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a delicious beer. I wouldn't have been able to call it a Helles or a Dortmunder if you asked me to. I would have had a 50-50 chance. I do think it's funny that you mentioned the marketing perspective of it, because years ago, let's call it 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I had my first Helles, I was saying to people, man, I don't know why this style's not popular in the U.S. Not only is it delicious, it has a cool name. Helles to me was always a cool name. Beer fans didn't give a shit. They just didn't care. They didn't know or care. And so it's funny now that Dortmunder is too out there, but Helles sells.
Right.
It finally caught up.
Well, I think Helles is easy to remember.
And
people will have it, especially people who may be just first experiencing craft beer will go, oh, that's something I can drink, and I can remember Helles. So they'll look for it on the menu.
That's a good point.
And try it out.
Are you going to keep this labeled as a Helles at the brewery, though?
Yes.
Yeah.
For the time, for the foreseable future.
Sure. And let's talk about that just for a second, just because we're going to go through metals. But this is sort of a common thing that brewers do. You take your beer, and you have to look at the beer styles and read them, obviously.
Yeah.
And you're a judge sometimes too, right?
Yes, I've judged.
So maybe put your judging hat on and go, all right, so this is a Helles, but to me it's a Helles. It's my version of a Helles, but I'm not sure it's going to stand up against maybe the BJCP guidelines or whatever they might be, right? So you sort of go, all right, I'm going to move it over to this category. And this is a fairly common thing brewers do. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we talked about this earlier, that sometimes you can be 100% absolutely happy with the beer, which is the case with this and with the Metal Mark we'll be talking about later. We love this beer.
Okay.
And we don't want to change a thing about it. And we are shopping categories to kind of see, where does it fit, and looking and reading the BJCP guidelines and or the Great American Beer Festival guidelines, the World Beer Cup guidelines. And as a judge, we will have whatever body is sanctioning that event. We will have that description in front of us so that all the judges are on the same page, because we all bring our own background and may all think slightly differently about a Helles.
Yeah.
And if it comes down to individual judges arguing about what they think the Helles is, that may be the case in a BJCP event because it's slightly different than what's being described in the GABF or Brewers Association guideline as well. So when you're looking through it, you just say, okay, I'm going to spend the money and effort to get this beer into a competition. I want to make sure that I have a competitive chance, because there are some bragging rights, but also ultimately as a business, you are looking to market that win as well.
Of course.
For the sale of the beer.
I've also heard judges, I know a lot of judges, come out of any one of those competitions that we've mentioned and said, yeah, I just judged an amazing beer. It was in the wrong category.
Yeah.
They were like upset that they had to kick it out because they just said if it had only been put into the correct category, this is a medal-winning beer. So it's your responsibility to do that.
Well, it is. And I certainly appreciate when judges will leave us notes because we get notes back from most major competitions from the judges themselves.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate, I've had a couple of those comments in the past where they've told me, this would be an amazing, whatever, kind of sort of thing. And you're like, oh, thanks for the feedback. Now, the other side of this where I was going to go was sometimes you're not quite happy with the beer. It's not quite clicking for you, and you enter into competition. You'll get notes back, and there will be some comments going, "Oh, I think you need this or you need that." And like, I think you're absolutely right. I think really good brewers are open to true criticism.
Sure.
And what we try to do with our notes is look and see, is there a theme? Because everyone will get notes back to say, one judge will say it's too sweet, the other one will say it's too dry or what. But if we had an experience where we sent in our Baltic Porter and the notes, 2 of the 3 judges said we had acetaldehyde in it. I'm like, really? And so we always do duplicate bottles so that we can try the beer before the competition, about the time when the judges would be trying it, and then after the competition as well.
Nice.
And so we went and took one of those dupes and opened it up, and we're like, wow, it is. It was really subtle, but we were looking for other things when we were kind of evaluating it,
right?
And maybe not the full spectrum. And we're like, wow, it really is there. So now we make sure we have a good, healthy, strong pitch for that beer because it's so big, and we want to make sure that we're wrapping up all those, all the fermentation products and stuff.
That's an excellent point. And like you said, that came from like 2 out of 3 judges that said it. And that's so I've always thought about when people talk to me about reading judge sheets and some brewers are different than others. I think you're right that the best brewers I know really like good feedback, good criticism. But brewer sheets can be a bit like Yelp. You remember when you were a restaurant guy? Some restaurant owners hate Yelp. I don't mind it one bit. I can read through the lines on those reviews. And if there's a consistent thing happening, you're probably fucking that up at your place. Right. So if 2 out of 3 said acetaldehyde, I think that's awesome that you were able to then go back and go, darn it, there it is.
Yeah, and that's why we keep the duplicates, so we can go back and see what they're seeing as well.
Well, this beer is awesome. It's Cushman and available at the brewery still now, or is it all gone?
Well, this might be an opportunity for to say that we have the brewery, but we also have the tasting room in Pleasant Hill.
Oh, yeah.
And I believe we're out of canned product in the brewery in Tracy, but we do have some in the tasting room in Pleasant Hill.
All right, so locals to Concord, Pleasant Hill area, you can still go get this beer. It's fantastic. A good Dortmunder or Helles, I would call it either one. It's a really nice beer. All right, so let's back up just a little bit. When I met you, Craig, so I started the Brewing Network in 2005, and you were on the show back in 2007, so very early years. We were still broke and in my garage.
Right.
And you were working for a little restaurant brewery called Schooners out, I think, in Antioch?
That's correct.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And I honestly don't remember how I came across your beer, but I'm certain it was like recommended to me because it was already fantastic back in 2007. When did you start brewing professionally? I'm curious about that.
Well, Schooners opened in 2001 with my best friend from college. He's the one who actually opened it. He came from Black Diamond early on and got his business plan going and opened Schooners. At the time, I was working in biotech on the East Coast. Okay. And he came out to visit, and his head brewer had just announced that he was going to need to leave because his wife was getting transferred. Like a lot of us, our wives support our brewing habits. So,
of course, yeah.
So he asked if we wanted to come back to California, which is where we're from, and my wife and I jumped at the chance. So
got it.
She was going to be working in high tech and marketing and stuff, and I would have the opportunity to brew and take care of the kids, basically, take them to school and that sort of thing. So
nice, yeah.
I just celebrated my 20-year anniversary in brewing. So that was in February of 2004 is when I started brewing at Schooners. And then you had us a couple years later because we'd won a few medals for the barley wine, and we came in to talk to you about barrel aging and,
that's right.
and that sort of thing. So.
Yeah. And I remember just tasting those and just, kind of, that was like really early into my foray of that type of beer too. So,
yeah. And I was really lucky that I think I have a biotech background, so a lot of the things that the brewery deals with were just kind of a natural fit for me with yeast management and that sort of thing. But they also had 2.5, 3 years of runway to kind of dial in some of the recipes and stuff. So when I came in, I wasn't also trying to figure out recipes. I was just trying to figure out the process and how to make it better and that sort of thing. Okay. So it was really nice. It was a great environment to come in and learn through. And I was the only brewer, so there's no assistants or anything.
Before that gig, I'm sure this is in that first show too, but before that gig, you didn't have any professional brewing training.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
So my best friend had gone through, Sean had gone through the Davis program and had been working professionally at Black Diamond for 3 or so years before he opened up Schooners. So that was a reservoir that I could tap in terms of knowledge and everything else. And then I was back there just trying to work through the whole, the professionalism of it, where you're trying to constantly be doing something. All the processes overlap so that you're not sitting there for 12 hours. We got down, we're in and out in probably 6.5 hours for a 15-barrel brew.
But the bio side of it wasn't really an issue for you. It was just applying what you knew to this new medium, basically.
Right. Enzymes, biology, all that. That was just a really nice fit for me. I knew exactly what they were talking about immediately.
Okay. And then just to kind of skip, so we can get to the present too. So that's 04. I have you on in 07. And right around 2014, Schooners sells to the current owners of Morgan Territory.
Well, I think we need to back up because some people, right around the 08, 2010, 12, the big financial crisis.
Yeah.
Schooners wasn't doing as well. I was only in there probably once a week to brew occasionally.
Okay.
And about that time, JJ from EJ Fair had approached me and said, "Hey, do you want a full-time gig over here?" And times were tough, so I said, yeah. So
of course.
Went over there and worked there for probably about a year and a half.
Also here in Concord, or was that Pittsburgh by then?
It was Pittsburgh.
Okay,
that. So I guess it was later because I was only there, I think, a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And then that's when my current partners bought Schooners in 2014.
So you weren't really at Schooners when your current partners bought Schooners? Yeah, okay.
Correct. And so they approached me and asked me if I wanted to come back work for them full time.
Nice.
I was like, yes.
And did they find you just because they knew you were the former brewer there?
Well, I was still ducking in and out here and there.
Checking it out.
So I had a deal with the previous owner that I said, you don't need a full-time brewer. I'll come in and brew the beer once a week, every other week or what have you.
Nice.
And then I'll duck in, put it into your tanks, and you just pay me an hourly fee. So it was super flexible with especially with kids in school and that kind of stuff. So that was nice. But the new owners, the Lacrosses, my partners, they wanted to come in and I'll focus on the beer.
Okay.
And the restaurant would be more of a kind of a side project, but little did they know how much the restaurant side can kind of consume everything.
And it wasn't a tiny restaurant, if I remember right.
No, we were 6,000 square feet.
Yeah, that was a big old place
with a 900 square foot brewery.
Yeah. So at some point after 2014, you and your new partners, the Lacrosses, decide, hey, restaurant's not for us. We want to do a production brewery. When does that happen exactly?
So we closed down on Super Bowl Sunday of 2015.
Okay.
That was our last day open.
Wow, they discovered quickly that they're not down for this restaurant thing.
That's correct. It wasn't quite a year. I think it was 10, 11 months or so.
Good for them.
Yeah, kind of, going through the winter as well was kind of rough.
Yeah.
So we shut down, and then we have the summer to find a location and that sort of thing. So we had a couple locations in Antioch that we were looking at, a couple locations in Brentwood that we were looking at. And one of the things that struck us with Schooners was, even though business was going down and we'd had a couple break-ins in Antioch, the landlord was going to raise our lease 40%.
Yikes. Even back then.
Yeah. So it became clear that we wanted to control our own destiny. So we were looking for a building to buy.
Okay.
Take whatever loans we needed or what have you. And like I said, we started in Antioch, worked to Brentwood, and then just on the commercial real estate website, this site came up that was in Tracy that had everything we needed, 400 amps of 480 power, and
oh wow,
we're like, wow, that's everything we're.
That's half
need.
the battle.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. It was already in house, and it was at a decent price, so we could buy the building and be in control of our destiny from there. So
wow.
Looking at other breweries, at the time it seemed like it took us forever to open. So we took possession of the building August 1st, 2015.
Okay.
Had to rent it back, and so we actually got inside the building September 1st of 2015 and had the brewery open on Friday the 13th, May 2016.
Okay.
So 8 months.
That's pretty amazing.
That's everything. Permits, everything, and we were pouring beer at that point. So
wow.
Listening to other people's horror stories, we look back and think, wow, we were pretty lucky to get it open.
Was it a brand new brew system and everything that you bought and had installed, or?
Well, we all agreed that we needed a proof of concept because being a brew pub, we didn't have much experience distributing. Now, at Schooners, every other week I'd go out with about 12 kegs and sell to key local accounts. I'd do the South Bay 1 week, and then 2 weeks later I'd do kind of the East Bay.
Okay.
So we had some accounts out there, but we wanted to make sure before we got too deep into debt and everything that we had a viable brewery concept. So we took the whole brew system from Schooners and moved it into this huge warehouse. Seemed like this tiny little thing.
Yeah, it looks like a homebrew setup at that point. Yeah.
Well, we went from a 900 square foot brewery to a 15,000 square foot brewery. Okay. And it's just sitting this little area.
How many barrels was it?
It's a 15 barrel.
Yeah, okay.
Pub
so
system.
Not tiny, but yeah, okay.
Exactly. So with a couple fermenters and that sort of thing. So we actually worked on that system for 3 years until we decided, we're profitable and we can justify jumping up to a 30 barrel 4-vessel system.
Got it.
That's what we have now.
That's what you have now. Okay, yeah. Have you filled out the entire warehouse now with fermenters and everything else?
It's nuts. Yeah, we have no more space for anything. We have a 32. We have a 3,200 square foot cooler.
Wow, yeah.
And we call it clean side, dirty side. So the cooler, keg washing, and everything's on the dirty side, and then all the tanks are on the clean half of the building. So we've got, I don't know, it's 19 fermenters and
nice.
6 horizontal lager tanks. So
wow.
We just completed the expansion. That's why I'm having to do the math in my head here.
I'm stoked to hear the story because I started finding Morgan Territory beer. Well, me personally, if I'm honest, right around 2020. Mm-hmm. The Hop Grenade here was buying it and serving it before that. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't here a whole bunch before the COVID situation. So right around 2020, I was here an awful lot, and then there's your beer. And I'm happy to hear the story because I thought you just had moved away from Schooners, and it was just an entirely new project. And it wasn't until I sort of dove in that I realized, oh, this is still all combined. It's still part of the same story, which I really like. I like that you have this kind of long history with these people and with this beer, but you did rebrand to Morgan Territory at around the time you found the place in Tracy, I guess. Yeah, we did. We had anticipated, or we were going to go forward with Schooners because it had a history and we had a good reputation for making great beer. We just found that someone had trademarked the name prior to us. Okay.
Yeah, Schooners Exact up in Seattle. So
I did always want to ask, though, since I found your beer in 2020, I used to take my dog hiking in Morgan Territory. Yeah. I would have to drive out Marsh Creek Road from my place in Concord, and it was one of the only open spaces I could take my dog hiking. Is this the same Morgan Territory that the brewery's named after?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and cool.
Part of that was when we were investigating this whole trademark thing, because you're going forward with a vision in your mind. It's going to be Schooners, and then you feel like the rugs got pulled out from you. And there was no avenue forward really on Schooners. So our lawyer advised that, well, choose a family name or a regional name, and those are really strong, and you don't have to worry about people scooping in with trademarks you didn't know, or prior use.
That makes sense.
Things. So we started exploring those ideas, and I threw out Morgan Territory because it's a park I loved, and it was in between. It was in between Brentwood, where I lived at the time, and Livermore, where I was moving, and so we spent a lot of time just being up there. Yeah. And when you're up there, it's close to the Bay Area, very close. And
totally. Yeah.
It's probably probably half an hour from 580 and or 4, right in the middle. Yet you feel like you're in the middle of nowhere.
That's why I love it.
At the base of Mount Diablo sort of thing. So we kind of going through all the different names. We really embraced it. We thought it gave it kind of a rugged Western character. If we ever left the area, that might resonate as well. Yeah. And we just really liked the story and the location.
I love it. I related to it immediately, but like I said, I had this kind of personal experience with it. Okay. And we're going to hop around just a little bit, but now you have a head brewer in James. And James, I hope you'll forgive me when I say, but now that I'm old, I think I'm allowed to say that you look like a baby. How long have you been brewing? And just give us a little bit about your background.
So I started home brewing back. Sorry, about that. I started homebrewing back in, I'd say I picked it up myself back in 2016.
Okay.
I was a very young man, definitely 21, 100%, 100% 21.
Like all of us when we started homebrewing, yeah.
Right. They don't ID you to buy the ingredients. So,
right, exactly.
Anyways, I got into homebrewing at that time. I was working at a restaurant at the time, pizza joint at the time. I was a little bit of a directionless, college student that didn't really have an idea.
Okay.
And at that pizza joint, we had a pretty good craft beer selection, and we were a little bit more focused on that. And that was kind of my introduction into craft beer itself.
Nice.
And in that, I found, And
is that out in Tracy? Or
actually in Lodi.
Lodi, okay.
I was working at Smack Pie Pizza in Lodi at the time.
All right.
I started there back right after high school, back in 2014. 21 at the time.
Okay.
And I ended up leaving there in 2018 to eventually pursue my full-time career here in brewing. But I started home brewing back in 2016 time. Had it the haze craze. I was learning about it, still kind of figuring out what craft beer was.
Sure.
And I found a love in it in the sense of you get to work with your hands. It's this creative process.
Yeah.
And I've never was a guy that wanted to sit behind a desk. Luckily, by that point, I hadn't focused any of my schooling yet. So I was able to focus all of my education at that point into getting into the UC Davis Brewing program.
Oh, nice.
Because I knew that I wanted to do something with that at the one point, and so that was the direction that made sense.
I see.
Ended up getting into that program in 2019. So I ended up coming into Morgan territory in late 2018.
While still in the program,
while about to go into the program, finishing up being at the time the general manager for the pizza joint. Just making sure I filled in my duties to them.
Smart.
And anyways, I ended up getting an internship at Morgan Territory Brewing. At the time, I was doing all the beer buying for the pizza joint.
Okay.
And part of it was me going there was that I'd really fallen in love with that brewery.
Nice.
Silo Rider Red Ale, which we still make, and I believe we brought a little bit with us today, was actually the beer that really caught my attention from them.
Okay.
But at the time, they were also making a Helles Lager, Helles Bent.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I think it was an early iteration of Cushman.
It was.
Okay.
And so both those beers were a favorite of mine. And as the beer buyer at Smack Pie, I would make sure to keep them on when I could and bring them in. And with that, I got to know the head of sales that we have, Austin. And he had brought to attention that they were looking for an intern on the side. And so I ended up coming in.
Nice.
Came in. Was washing kegs, filling kegs, doing whatever, scrubbing floors, doing that.
Yeah.
Ended up getting into the Davis program in 2019. I got to have the last year with Charlie Bamforth.
Oh, that's great.
He's a fantastic man. It was awesome to learn from him.
Yeah.
He ended up leaving the program to focus on full-time over at Sierra Nevada.
Yeah. Yeah. We've had him on several times, and I would concur that you're lucky to have gotten in. Now, I don't know who's there now, so it's no slight on them, but lucky to have had Charlie.
It's an experience. He is a very he's a boisterous man with a lot of personality, and he's very fun to be around, and he's a wealth of knowledge.
Absolutely.
But I got very lucky to have him and Jim Brown and the rest of the team there at UC Davis. Went through that program. It was the 6-month program. And I did train for the IBD tests. I ended up passing the IBD courses. And so I do technically have my diploma in brewing.
Okay.
That's a fun title.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, and it's worked pretty well for me since. I came back to the brewery after that. I was working in the tasting room during, just kind of keeping busy, keeping around. But then after that, I was, back to being grunt.
Yeah.
Coming into 2020, I ended up taking an opportunity out in Connecticut at Two Roads Brewing.
Oh, right. I'm from Connecticut.
Oh, are you? What area?
It's been a long time ago, so I don't know any of those. I wouldn't know a single brewery that's there anymore.
I was in the brewery was in Stratford, Connecticut.
Oh, okay.
And I was living in Milford, just outside of New Haven and Bridgeport.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So Two Roads Brewing, big production facility.
120,000 barrels.
Wow.
At that time, they were doing 160, I believe.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, they did a lot.
That's a big production brewery. Yeah.
And they were doing a lot of contract production too. So we got to meddle our hands into like Athletic Brewing's production with them.
Okay.
Lawson's Finest Liquids, a number of things there.
Yeah.
And so that experience.
That's a lot to learn.
It was. I moved, and the thing with the timing of it all was very funny. I moved out there in February of 2020. We know how that went.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
the absolute worst time.
They ended up being able to keep me on, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I stuck it out for another 8 months or so. But I'm Central Valley born and raised.
Okay.
And eventually things came up. It was time for me to come back home. There was a lot going on in the world. So.
Okay.
And luckily, when I got back, Morgan Territory was able to bring me back in.
Excellent.
As a brewer.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you guys are at least somewhat growth focused as a production brewery. So, I mean, I'm not saying you're looking to take over the world, but you're looking to grow. So these kind of skills coming from a brewery of that size and doing contract brewing and running that, I'm sure that was pretty attractive already.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, looking at that, someone who has seen how big breweries work, and sometimes the inertia of a big brewery will have you doing things that may not be ideal, but you have to get it done. And having someone with that experience, you can maybe take a step back as you go into it and say, hey, we don't want to step in this big pile on our way because it leads to other problems. So that was very attractive. Well,
and here we are in 2024 and you're the head brewer.
Yeah, it worked out really well in that sense. I came back. I ended up coming in as a brewer. I was Kyle Manigold, who's the head brewer of Faction Brewing now.
Yep.
He was the head brewer at Morgan at the time. Very happy to have had the opportunity to learn and continue to actually practice my skill with both Craig and Kyle.
Yeah, Kyle's a great brewer.
He's a fantastic brewer.
Yeah.
Love that man. Nothing but great things about him.
Yeah.
And, he ended up deciding to go over to Faction, and that opened up an opportunity for me.
Nice.
And, it worked out really well in that sense. And here I am since, just trying to make sure that I'm keeping those reins up and keeping things going.
I love it. All right. Well, we've got so much more to talk about and more beer to taste, of course. So why don't we do this? We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, more from Morgan Territory and more beer to try from Morgan Territory. Hang in there. You're listening to The Session. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Session. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. We are still here with Morgan Territory Brewing Company, of course, and we're talking to Craig and James about award-winning beer and a lot of history, and we're gonna do more of that. Plus, talk a little bit about expansion. Before we get to that, hey, really quick, go check out the Beersmith Brewing software. You can go to beersmith.com. There's a free desktop trial, a free web version. It's the best brewing software out there. Brad's been a sponsor of this show for years, and I know a ton of pro brewers and, of course, home brewers that use Beersmith. Go to beersmith.com. It's the only brewing software still actively managed constantly by the founder, Brad Smith. And it's just, it's good stuff. Beersmith.com. Check it out. And thank him for sponsoring this show, too. He's also got a great podcast if you want some more beer in your ears. You can check out the Beersmith podcast. All right. So I want to go back to the Cushman just real quick because we were talking about something at the break, Craig, that I wanted to mention here. And that is a beer that still tastes great as it warms up. Sounds like a silly thing, right? But like for the layman. But it's a difficult trait to have in it's the I think the selling point of a really great beer.
Well, thank you. One of the things that we pride ourselves on is we like to think of our beer as bold and balanced at the same time. So you'll get those big, bold notes for whatever you're looking for here, being a Dortmunder and that sort of thing. But we like it. We understand that people are going to be drinking this beer over the course of, we'll call it an appropriate pouring size.
Yeah.
And for the Dortmunder, that would be a pint. And we recognize that it will be poured cold, and you'll get one experience. And then as it warms up, different layers will start to develop. But we also try to balance that residual sugar at the end and the bitterness at the end and all of that, so that the entire experience of the pint is going to be slightly different, but it's also pleasurable. So as it warms up, it doesn't get too sweet, or it's not too bitter when it's cold. So there's this little sweet zone that you're trying to balance. And that's where the kind of the art of the recipe comes in, where you're doing these little minor tweaks constantly. Like, I like to have the beers in different environments at different times, and that you'll hit you slightly differently. So over the course of a month or something like the Dortmund, or something that we brew just twice a year, we'll try it, and over the course of its 6 weeks, 8-week life, we'll get that experience. So, okay, next time I think we need to lower the bittering hops just a little bit, so it's more approachable when you first have it when it's cold, or it's too sweet at the end, we need to dry it out a little bit as well. So there's all these little nuances trying to hit that sweet spot for us for all of our beers.
And I think I know about you that you have volumes of notes about your brew days, your brew recipes, and so I'm guessing that as you taste beer in these different environments, that's where these notes go, where you go back. Because in other words, I don't think you can just think of this stuff in the recipe room and go, hey, this is when it's going to taste good, cold, and a little warm.
Right.
You have to do it in the real world.
Well, experience brings that. You'll get in the ballpark. And honestly, we try to target about the 5th batch is where we should hit it. You're going to have little tweaks here and there. But I lost my train of thought.
No, that's okay. Well, you gave me a question.
Right.
I want to know is it usually then not till the 5th batch that it ends up in a competition?
No, not necessarily. To tell you the truth, so we did, as James alluded to earlier, we did Helles Bent, which was a earlier version of the Helles, and then we hadn't done it for a while, and we did another batch, and we just kind of upped everything because we felt it was just kind of a little too blah, and that was the Cushman, and that recipe hit the first time.
Okay.
And we've made some tweaks since then, and we've hated every tweak we've done.
Oh, right, so you go back. Yeah.
And so we're right back to where we started.
Nice.
At the very beginning.
Oh, very nice.
And that's the fun of the trial and error process with each recipe. You definitely get, like, you have to look outside yourself, maybe talk to your brewer friends, get a better perspective. And then with that, you can go back and you make what might seem like a minor change, but it changes everything in the beer.
Sure.
And sometimes you're not that as far off as you might think you're going to be.
Okay.
And it plays off really well when you can realize that it's like, oh, I just needed to up the amount, or sometimes lower the amount of something. Maybe you're overdoing it, and so it's muddling.
Right.
And that's where judging can come in handy too. There's been times where you think you've got the best beer, like it's amazing. And then within a judging environment or something, not that you'd be judging your own beer, but comparing other beers like it, you're like, oh my God, that's what my beer's missing, kind of thing. I knew there was something. You don't know what you don't know, right? And then you pick it up in another beer. But I want to get back to, you're talking about the notes that we keep. So we have pretty detailed notes on everything that we do. And one of the examples I can go back to is we had been winning 1 or 2 medals a year back at Schooners. I'm like, what's the secret sauce? Because we're entering 10, but we're not necessarily always hitting on those. And I went back and looked at the notes. And for those that are familiar with, say, production breweries, we will normally pitch the yeast from the previous batch. Mm-hmm. So the beer will ferment, the yeast will settle out into the conical cone of the fermenter, and then you'll take that yeast and put it into the next fermenter and keep going. And I think at the time it was 5 or 6 GABF medals I'd won over the course of a couple years. And I went back and looked, and there's weeks when you need to brew 2 beers in the same week back in that brew pub. So it's coming off 1 cone. So you'll take the bottom of that cone and put it into the first beer, and then you'll take the rest of the yeast higher up in the cone and put it in the second beer. So it's called a second pitch off of that. All 6 of my medals had been won off of that second pitch.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. So there's little things like that. And so from then on...
Was that a crazy, like, late-night aha moment for you when you noticed that?
I'm like, wow, I don't need statistics to tell me that's a real thing.
It happened 6 times.
I'm getting really healthy yeast. The stuff that's dropping out first, you're like, it doesn't matter, kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It has a little trube in it, that sort of stuff. It does. So that's one of the things that we do is we drop the first 5 gallons out of every cone and then use the, say next 15 to 20 gallons for the pitch.
This is a great piece of information for our listeners to see. I hope you don't mind giving that out.
I offered it, so I love sharing.
That's awesome. And so, like you said, so to me, and I would never do this. My brain doesn't work like this. So I love learning about people like you who just document every piece of data that you can, and then comb through it, and you found this one, and you're like, oh shit, look at that. 100% of the time, it worked.
Yes.
Yeah, amazing. Right. Okay. All right. The beer in our glass right now, which is the Metal Mark, this is fantastic.
Thank you.
This is my favorite beer so far. The Cushman was also wonderful. I've also had the Snapshot in my glass, which is American Lager, I think.
It's we were talking about categories before. That's a case where we brewed it, we really liked it, and then we had never really entered it in competition. And then we started shopping categories. Where does this really fit in terms of a category? Because there's subtle differences between the light lagers, and it really aligns with a cream ale.
Mm-hmm.
A cream ale / lager.
Yeah.
Because you can use lager or ale yeast for
a cream ale.
The cream style.
Okay.
And the problem is it's a sales issue. So whenever the sales, our sales go out, and I'm sure other people have this problem too, to sell a cream ale, the first question is, it has lactose in it?
It contains 0 cream.
Right.
Exactly.
So Faction, since we already mentioned them too, they've won quite prolifically with 1970s lager in the cream ale category.
Correct.
And they don't call it a cream ale either.
Correct.
It's a sales thing.
And so does 21st Amendment.
Right.
O'Sully and their amendment.
Got it. The 21st Amendment lager. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. Especially now, and in fact, that I guess maybe it was always this way with cream ale, but now that consumers are a little more savvy and they do consume beers with lactose in it, they're like, oh, that's one of those.
Right.
Interesting.
Exactly. So it makes it challenging to sell.
Well, tell me about the Metal Mark, the one that's in our glass now.
So we'll go back a little farther in history on this one. So my very first homebrew was a kit, but the very second brew was an all-grain brew.
You jumped fast.
Oh, yeah. Me and my best friend Sean, who opened Schooners, Sean Burns, the second batch we ever did was a Oktoberfest. That was our favorite style back then. And when the rest of the country was kind of getting into ambers and that stuff in the 90s, we said, we'll step up the amber a notch and go with the Oktoberfest. So we had a critical friend at the job that we were both working at the time who was awesome, who gave us good, honest feedback.
Okay.
And the first couple batches, he's like, it's a beer, it's alcohol. Like a lot of homebrewer friends, like, okay. But it wasn't until the 7th batch, we did 7 in a row because we have obsessive compulsive natures to try to dial this in. On the 7th batch that we put out, he said, I'd buy this beer.
Okay.
And so we were really hooked at that point. And then we started, after that, then we started experimenting with other styles and that sort of thing. So it was a lot of fun.
Can I ask what good or maybe great examples of Oktoberfest you had at that time? Like, did you travel? Did you have did a craft brewery do a good job? Because this is back to me when craft beer was still a little hit or miss.
Right. Well, we were drinking the German styles that would come in. And then based on that, then we would try Gordon Biersch.
Good beer,
We were both San Jose State students at the time. So Gordon Biersch had a downtown location, and Tide House had a San Jose.
Tide House, yeah.
Yeah, Tide House started in Mountain View, but then had a San Jose location as well. So that was our first real introduction into craft beer and trying the craft styles as well.
Okay.
And looking back on it, the recipes were lots of biscuit malt and,
of course,
and C45 and that sort of thing. And that kind of bled into our recipes at Schooners. And I actually had a judge at one point say, kill the caramel malt. I knew he was right, but at the same time, when it's a beer you brew once a year, having to start from scratch and knowing that, like I said, 5 iterations to try to absolutely dial it in on a big scale. I got 5 years till I think it's going to be perfect. And I got lucky. The next year, after I changed the recipe, I got silver at the GABF.
Oh, nice.
So it was kind of set then.
I don't remember people saying kill the crystal malt, though, till like 2010 at the earliest. Like, to me in 2005, it was still crystal malt when I was making homebrew recipes and beers, and it was still good, by the way. For some reason, I don't know, it was good. It was, our palates were different then, right?
Well, this was a judge as well, too. So
someone to listen to.
Yeah, and I 100% understand what you're saying.
Yeah,
but from their standpoint, and we were talking earlier about judging. The coldest beer a judge will have is at cellar temperature when it's first kind of brought out. They're trying to organize 10 beers in a flight and then get them out to you, and they've warmed up in that time.
Yeah.
And so generally the judge will start trying the beer when it's about cellar temperature, and then as they go through that whole flight of 10 to 12 beers, they're all kind of warming up, and then you open up to start talking with the other judges about what you picked up and that sort of thing. And then as you're talking with the other judges, they bring up things that maybe you picked up or didn't, or vice versa, and then you go back to try the beer again, and now it's warm.
It's changed.
Yeah, it's room temperature. And so it's sweetened up at that time, and definitely caramel malt and that sort of thing is something that will elevate when beers are warm.
Okay.
And they start getting saccharine. So from that standpoint, that opened my eyes as well, that I'm like, how do I create this sweetness without this caramel malt? And you can still do it, with just the maltiness of the Munich, the Vienna, and the Pilsner all together.
Without a ton of crystal. Yeah.
Without any.
Without any crystal, yeah.
So,
okay.
So Metal Mark has no crystal in it whatsoever.
Okay.
So it's about half Pilsner, maybe, I don't know, probably 2/5 of that, 40% would be Vienna, and then some Munich and dark Munich thrown in there as well to give it the color and the little toastiness that you get in there as well.
And yeast strain, are you proprietary or?
No, we're very open about it. We use the Ondex strain. It puts off a little bit more esters, so we have to ferment it at a much cooler temperature to try to keep those restrained. But the big advantage of that is it puts out virtually no sulfur.
Okay.
We do a little diacetyl rest as well because it can have that. We haven't had that experience, but it's just more about managing the esters on it. So, but it's very clean, needs very little aging because there's so little sulfur in it.
And do you have to decoction mash or anything like that? No, just modified malt and you're fine.
Yep.
So this is an Oktoberfest recipe to you, is what I'm hearing.
Well, so as you get into it and you start shopping these categories and stuff, the same beer also won in the German Oktoberfest category. Now, we came in strong. We knew we were a little weak for the Märzen category because, well, I'll back up a little. We love this beer, we love this recipe, and we didn't want to change it. So we're not going to change it to fit into a category. This is our beer and we love it. So we were looking at what category it might fit. And to really open your eyes, the German Oktoberfest is going to be a lot lighter in color.
That's what
and just
I thought.
Very quaffable. You can just really drink them all day long. Very dry. Then you step up about half a level to a Vienna, but that has a little more toasty notes. It's less bread and more toast associated with it. And then when you get up to a Märzen, you're going away from the toast and getting back into more of these caramel notes without caramel malt and the bread notes in there as well.
Okay.
A bigger mouthfeel as well. And to be quite honest, you just can't drink as many Märzens as well because it's a very filling experience. And
Absolutely.
that's why we like this one as well. It's drier, got that little toast component that helps balance all the malt out, and it's very quaffable.
So you ended up choosing Vienna Lager as the category.
Yes.
And it won
silver.
A silver.
Yes.
Yeah. No, this is a great beer. Are you two the tasting team when this happens too? Do you have a whole team? Like what happens when you guys are kind of not only deciding on the categories, but QC in general? Is it you sitting in your office alone, Craig, with 50?
I hope not.
Well, it definitely is always a team effort.
Yeah.
And the more minds, the better on any sort of tasting regimen. certain people are blind to certain things.
Absolutely.
Certain people just are like certain things. And so with that, I very much like bitterness. I'm a bitter guy. I want
like a
that,
firm
I like
bitterness.
that bite on things.
Okay.
Other people have to tell me to knock the bitterness off a little bit because
Sure.
I'm always like, it's great. And it's just biting everybody's tongues,
Okay. Yeah.
And that's where we all as a team come to balance each other. So it's between us two, our other brewer that works with us, Mike Derland.
Okay.
We have our head of sales, some of the other salesmen, tasting room people, anybody that we trust has a good palate, and we're willing to bring into that conversation.
That makes
is
sense.
always going to come in because the more minds you can bring in, the better scope you get on the beer.
Well, and like you said, sometimes there's subtleties that like you might not even pick up, especially if you're focused on something else.
Right.
Like I'm guessing you're doing the recipe design, Craig.
For the most part, I do. But
and you might just be like laser focused on this part of it that makes you miss another part of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'll bring it to the guys and say, hey, what do you think about this or that? And like, oh, maybe we should dank this up a little or, that sort of thing.
Sure.
But here's a big admission for me, like why we do group tastings and stuff is whether you recognize it or not, all of us are going to have a blind spot. And mine just happens to be a huge blind spot that everyone recognizes. I am diacetyl blind.
Oh, wow.
100% diacetyl blind. Stouts with diacetyl are so silky and smooth. They're amazing.
And people are like, no.
And I'm over here just like, dude, it tastes like butter.
Yeah.
He doesn't know what butter tastes like.
Right.
But at the same time, I'm exquisitely sensitive to oxidation.
Okay.
So like people are like, oh, the hops. I'm like, I can't smell anything but oxidation and cardboard here. So I don't know, what you're talking about. Like many people with diacetyl, they can't smell anything but the diacetyl. And we have our partner, Michael Lacrosse, is very sensitive to sulfurs. So we'll like, is this sulfur-free kind of stuff? And he's like, oh, man, this is horrible. So we're like, okay, it needs a little more aging time for, say, maybe
This is a great
lager.
group, if you ask me. Yeah,
Yeah.
because these are some of the not just that they can be pronounced, but they can be so common. So like, if you were just the only brewer tasting and you're diacetyl blind, you'd never have found success.
Right.
You could build the best recipes in the world. You would have never found success.
Exactly.
So sounds like a good group. you know? Yeah.
And being able to listen to what other people are saying. And sometimes at first you're like, what? But then you're like, oh, take a step back.
Yeah.
We all have a different perspective, and that's valuable. And it's really worked out well.
I want to tell this story, but I don't want to offend anybody. I had a beer from a yeast producer once.
Okay.
And my whole staff was like, it would be a great beer if it wasn't full of diacetyl.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him, and he's like, absolutely not. There's no way. We tested for that. I'm a yeast producer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, I don't know how to argue with you. I'm not a yeast producer, and I don't have an instrument. What I do know is that 4 out of 5 of my staff only tasted diacetyl. Mm-hmm. And the argument never really got resolved. The next batch of beer I got was fine. I'll tell you that.
Right.
But you can sometimes be so blind and even use, I don't know how that happened, but sometimes even use instruments. I don't know if it showed up after there was a measurement, right? Like there's all sorts of things that can happen. But I remember feeling like, I'm telling you, I don't think I'm lying to you. And the person was very defensive about it. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to leave it at that. You have instruments, I have staff. I don't know what to tell you.
Right.
But you have to be, no matter what, I think you have to be open to hearing it and then going back to explore it, right?
Well, that's where I'd be. If someone came to me who I respected and said, okay, I respect their palates, I don't think it's in the beer, but did somehow a keg not get properly cleaned? And so a dirty keg that got to room temperature could produce those flavors, or dirty beer lines.
Was it a line?
Yeah. Is it the line? If that's probably the most common source of a lot of diacetyl is dirty beer lines.
Sure.
And not being cleaned properly. So we get out, and all our sales staff has been trained, and they go out and clean all our lines out in the field. So
I like
we can
that.
keep that.
I just had, so I have to be pretty close to you to let you know that. But if I'm out in the field tasting my friend's beer, I text you. It happened recently, and I was like, oh, man, you got to come to this place. It looks like you have a regular handle here, so this is why I'm telling you. You're not a rotating tap. They need to clean their lines. And it was, so you got to know these things.
That's one of the things we did during the pandemic when everyone was shut down. We kept all our sales staff on salary. And one of the things we had them do is just go out to all of our accounts and show them how to shut down their taps for the foreseeable future.
Oh,
so
right. Yeah.
They went out with cleaning kegs and cleaned all the taps and then just had them sitting there with, some mild cleaning solution in it so they wouldn't get bad and nasty.
Sure.
And so when they were ready to open back up, they'd be ready to go.
This is a good amount of foresight on your part. When we were all thinking about how we're going to pay anybody, and I'm sure you were thinking of all this too.
We were.
To think of that, that is some forward-thinking beer stuff right there. You're a beer guy, Craig.
Yeah. Well, and that comes from Austin. That's our vice president of sales.
Oh, yeah.
And he owned a beer bar and is very passionate about good, clean tasting beer as well. And so he thought, how are we going to keep? No one wants to sit at home and just do nothing, and how are we going to also reach out to our retailers and stuff and build that relationship as well? And it really worked out.
Sure.
For everyone.
All right, before we take a quick break, how many barrels are you guys now? I'm just curious. A year.
We're doing about 5,000 barrels.
Oh, right.
Yeah, we were like 5,003 barrels last year. I threw in a little extra to get at the end of the year to get us up and over that hump.
Let's keep going. We're just over 5,000.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how they do Brewery of the Year voting and stuff, too, isn't it, by barrels? Like, if you're at the GABF, it's like between a certain amount of barrels.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay.
So that's... To quantify it, that's how much we put into the fermenters. So what comes out is a little bit less. So we're probably...
I didn't know that.
Yeah, because you have a loss. You have a certain amount of loss. So
sure.
What we actually put out in terms of kegs was probably 4,200 or something like that.
Yeah. No, I guess I just didn't know that the measurement went by what you put in. Like, if you were Brewer of the Year, like, do they care what that, but you give them the before measurement or the after measurement?
I give them the after.
Yeah.
What we actually put out.
Okay, so that's the after measurement. I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's kind of a morale thing, right? Hey, we put 5,000 barrels into the tanks.
Totally.
Right? So,
that is a morale thing. Yeah. Because back at Schooners, you would have been what, like
1,200.
I was thinking around 1,000. Yeah. Okay. 1,200. Yeah. It's a big growth, man.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's the nice thing or the interesting thing about Schooners was that as a brew pub, you can put your beer into serving tanks. So we had 8 15-barrel serving tanks where I basically just transfer into a tank that's directly connected to the taps. And if I need to do a keg for an account or something, I just pull off one at a time sort of thing. Whereas in a production brewery, everything has to go into kegs or a can. There's not that one easy, quick step into a big tank.
Even in your own tasting room at the production brewery.
Yeah.
Kegs.
Yeah. Serving tanks... to my knowledge, is what I read. Serving tanks are not legal outside of a brew pub.
Oh, interesting.
So we have to put them in the kegs and then serve them.
Because taxes, man.
Yep, that's exactly it.
You got to pay those taxes.
Well, it's funny you say that because I call them a serving tank, but what was labeled on the tanks and Schooners was tax determination tanks. If the feds came in, they knew exactly what tanks to measure to make sure you weren't skimming anything off the top.
Absolutely. Hey, you got to know how to do this stuff. All right. Why don't we do this? We'll take a quick break. We've spent this time talking about a lot of the history, and we've been talking about lagers, but you guys won gold for your... Double IPA, right? Double IPA. For the second time?
Yes.
For Hoptomic. We have that on tap here at the Hop Grenade, by the way. So, folks, if you're local, you're going to want to come out and try this beer. Some other good friends of ours have dominated this category a little bit, so I'm really stoked to see you guys in the mix here. And honestly, I haven't tried this latest batch yet. I saved it for this show.
Well, they're friends of ours, too.
So yeah, the Ghost Town Boys. Who also, I think they got bronze in the category.
They did, in Scotland.
So another medal there. But it's cool to see you guys up there, and I'm excited to try the beer. So we're going to try the double IPA. We're going to try a barrel-aged barley wine. And we're going to talk, I didn't do it this segment, we're going to talk about a little bit of your expansion, too. So hang in there. You're listening to The Session with Morgan Territory, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the session. Thank you again for hanging out with us. I am still sitting here with Craig and James from Morgan Territory Brewing Company. I don't know about you guys. I'm trying to ignore the World Series baseball game that's going on in the background. Diehard Giants fan over here. So
as am I.
all I care about is that the Dodgers lose.
Exactly.
I'm a diehard A's fan.
You're okay. Oh, I'm so sorry for you, Craig.
Somebody had to break up for you.
Condolences accepted. Yes.
Yeah. No, and I mean that serious. That wasn't even sarcasm. I really am sorry about that situation. It's let me ask you that. Let's do one baseball question. Would you go see them in Sacramento while they're still here to just sort of feel like they're still your A's, or are they already gone?
That's a tough question because I support the A's and I support the players and what they're going through. We've always gone to the Stockton ports and supported them. When we lived in Brentwood, it was real close, half hour down the road, and loved that park. I've been to Rayleigh, what was called Rayleigh Field. I'm not sure what it's called now, but it's a fantastic stadium. Mm-hmm. It's going to be miserable for pros, I would imagine, playing in that heat where they have that heat. They normally have domes and that sort of stuff. But the problem I have is I'll support the players, but giving my money to John Fisher is the problem.
This is the problem.
I know.
And the player... we could do a whole show about this, Craig, so let's not. But yeah, I feel for you. And look, I'm a Bay Area fan. Bay Area teams. It's hard to watch Oakland lose all of their teams.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I got to start a sports podcast, I think. I heard one of your partners is into sports radio and sports. I was reading his bio, and he was asked, what's his favorite song? And he said, Sports Talk.
Yep, that's exactly it. I asked that same thing, and he's like, I listen to sports radio.
Yeah.
Like, wow, okay.
I might need to tap into him for my sports podcast. All right. We have an amazing beer in our glass, but before we get to that, I did want to talk, even if it's just briefly, about Morgan Territory's expansion. So you have the brewery out in Tracy, and it sounds like you've filled that up. You're now at least the space capacity. You're probably not quite at your barrel capacity.
No, I mean, we've always been forward thinking, whether that's foolhardy or not. But when we have an opportunity to expand, or even when we're purchasing equipment, so. To go back, when we first opened up that 15,000 square foot warehouse, we had a 2 million BTU burner operating a 15 barrel brew house, which is 10x overkill. Okay, well, not. It's
and you
probably
put that in, or it was there?
No, we bought it. With the idea that it's probably the price between different tiers in the boiler are not that much.
So do it once.
So it's $40,000 for the one we needed, or $50,000 for the one for the future. Okay. And the cost of tearing everything out would be enormous. Plus downtime and everything else. So if it was a small incremental, sort of thing that we could plan for the future, that's what we did. Okay. And we have, like I mentioned, a huge, it's 80 by 40 cooler, a 3,200 square foot, and with just originally we had it divided in half, and we're only using half of it. But the installation and everything, to move would be huge. So just wherever we could to try to plan for the future, we did.
Okay. So you're ready for a capacity growth there, but at some point, I want to say around 2021 or so, 2020 also, you decide to expand to a tap room a bit far away, still here in the Bay Area, but far away from Tracy, close to me here in Pleasant Hill.
Yeah, it's actually only been open for slightly over a year.
Okay.
So we opened in June of last year.
But when did you acquire the space? I thought that was a bit of time.
We were looking for a while, but I guess leases and stuff, you're probably right. I'm more on the brewery side of it, and I'm involved in the meetings. I'm like, okay, but not get down into details. So it was let's see, we're 24, 23. Yeah, probably 21, 22. We started looking at it and starting to get the details. You're right. I mean, we had to sign up for a long time, and then it was in the old Sweet Tomatoes building in Pleasant Hill. Yeah. And we got one. They divided it into 3 sections. We got one of those sections. Okay. And we're really lucky that we've partnered with Jack's Taps fame and Jack's Restaurant. They opened up a concept restaurant right next to us, Jack's Cantina, or Cantina Jack's, I think is what it's called. And we have a pass-through window, so our patrons can scan a QR code and order food directly from them, and it arrives in our tasting room. So it's worked out really well for both of us.
So again, it's fun for me to have you here and telling the story. I'm gonna give you some honesty now. When I went to your opening day, and I had seen the sign out front, and because I'm from here, in fact, I live around the corner from there, so I'm always going to that area. I always go to Jack's. Really like Jack's and Jack's Taps. But I assumed when you opened Morgan Territory that it was going to be a restaurant, and here's why. I assumed that because even though it seems like there's a lot going on there's not. In other words, Jack's has a line out the door every lunch.
Right.
And every dinner is busy, and I'm just like, man, they just really got this cornered. Someone should be opening a cool place here. So then I see the Morgan Territory name, and I'm like, all right, cool place, cool food. I just assumed food. And I go to your opening night, and you tell me no food. And again, just because I'm being honest, I was like, oh, man, Craig, I think you fucked up. I think you should have. But you told me very quickly, we're going to have food. It's going to be passed through. And now that I know the story that you guys have sort of been down that road.
Our trauma.
And decided you're like, this is not us. We don't want this. This is not. So now it really all sort of makes sense to me that you're like, no, let's just have a satellite location. We're going to provide food. You've got by the way, the Jack's, it's a bit of a Mexican food concept. It's great food. I've been there. To be able to serve it there, you just need people to stay and buy the beer, right? So, and I'm glad you guys open there because now I get another great brewery near me.
A fun story though is, and we're very okay with this, is sometimes the line is too long at Jack's, the wait, and people will come over to our tasting room and order their food from our tasting room through the little window.
Perfect.
They don't order any beer, and that's fine. They got to experience what our environment's like, and hopefully they'll come back in the future for a beer next time.
This is what I've been hoping for here at the Hop Grenade. So we have a menu here. We're not a full kitchen, so you'd like our concept. It's like just,
I do.
It's
I'm very
just
impressed.
enough, right?
Yeah.
Food wise.
Yeah.
But we have, I don't even know what's opening next door to us. But what I've been dreaming of, so EJ Fair used to be next door to us, and they closed a few years back. And I've been dreaming of a crazy popular restaurant to open there. Like people think you don't want the competition. And I'm like, no, I want a crazy popular restaurant to open.
Rising tide.
That has a line out the door. Because what are they going to do while they're waiting? Sit on my patio and have a beer. Well, I don't know what I'm getting there, but I'm jealous of your concept already because that's what you want. You want it all to sort of work together.
Energy,
especially in a downtown area like you're downtown Pleasant Hill, I'm downtown Concord, and you sort of want that. And we're lacking it a little bit here. Before Hop Grenade, we looked at Pleasant Hill in that exact stretch.
Oh, awesome!
And just decided it wasn't for us. We got a great offer on this spot. Our beer festival is across the street, so it just sort of worked out that way, and I don't regret that. We picked the right spot for us. But I've always liked where you are. So I'm just saying, good job.
It's got great energy. Thank you.
Yeah, it really does. It's clean. It's nice. The people there are looking for good beer and good food. And so, yeah, you guys did well.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's your most recent expansion is to put a tap room in a completely different area.
Oh, correct. Yeah. And we've got, we're looking in El Dorado Hills right now.
Okay,
as well.
nice.
So it's you look at things that would be along your kind of distribution routes as well. So we're already running up to Musseter, one of our distributors, and if we could drop off at El Dorado, that'd be great too.
Okay. And what do you get under your brewing license? You get something like 6 or 7 tap rooms? I forget.
It's something like that. I think it's 6, and another one could be a brewery, and that brewery can expand another 6.
That's
or so.
as long as you put a brew house in it.
Yep.
Yeah. I love that loophole. It shouldn't be called a loophole. It's been that way for years. It's just that not many breweries have exploited it over the years.
That's the pizza port model.
Totally.
In a way, right?
Yeah. And Fieldwork did it really well here in the Bay Area. I think they're Drake's as well, but I think Fieldwork is like the prime example of like, we're going to go for this. If we're allowed 6, we're doing 6.
The tap rooms are expensive though, to open up. So you have to be in an area that you think you can, make your money back as well.
Sure. And especially now.
Yeah.
I mean, things are strange now, and we don't know. Like, we do this all the time here at the Hop Grenade. I still have a whole restaurant sitting in a container from our we had a Colorado location. So
that's right.
I have a restaurant in a box, but I just haven't found a location that I trust to unload that box into. It's a hard time. So I think you guys are brave and good for you.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going for a third one too. I mean, good for you.
Well, it's right now it seems like our brand is resonating and it's growing. We're in a market that's down, I think 8% or so. We're up 10% this year. So
wow,
we're really excited about that.
Good for
where
you.
It's going. So hoping to take some of that energy from the GABF medals and the just won State Fair Brewery of the Year as well.
Nice.
And take some of that energy, expand to Southern California and Nevada area as well.
Winning medals does not hurt. So let's talk about Hoptomic, which won a gold medal for double IPA, which was it wasn't the most popular?
No. Actually,
it's up there though, isn't it?
Funny story is that the Cushman we had first was the 4th largest category.
Oh, wow.
So within that category, it's a Oktoberfest and Dortmunder category.
Okay,
so gold and silver were Oktoberfest and the bronze was the Dortmunder ours, so technically we were the gold of Dortmunders.
Absolutely.
So that had 210 entries, and I think this double IPA had about 135 entries. So that's still a lot of competition across the U.S. So.
Absolutely. And it's your second GABF medal for this
Correct.
beer. Yeah.
So this is the only double IPA we did at Schooners. We do it once a year, was Hoptomic, and that's where that name came from. But it's that was a kind of a shadow of what it is now. We kind of tweaked with it a little while, but then, and we were getting close. The notes we were making it to the final table, but it's too sweet and to this, doesn't quite stand up to the competition. And that's when James kind of took it under his belt to start dialing it in.
Okay.
Yeah, and this beer is really fun. I mean, as far as the hops go, it's pretty classical, new craft brewer hops: Citra, Mosaic, Simcoe, and then some Columbus to bring a little bit of that old school in there.
Nice.
But the fun part about this beer is really finding that balance that we love here at Morgan Territory. And in such a big style, you're balancing the body of the beer, the bitterness, and that hop character. It's a dance. It's a new, and so this is this beer was a good lessons for me in learning the beer itself, letting it speak to you and what it needs to get back to where you want it to go.
Sure.
The first time that we won gold at World Beer Cup, it was very much more leaning in the Citra. It was much more leaning in that herbal side. The Mosaic kind of sweatiness was coming through. After that, it didn't seem to do well, and so we had to
And was that because you just were heavy on the Mosaic?
I think it was actually we were heavy on the Citra.
Heavy on the Citra, sorry.
And, the other side of that is, we get the new lot of crops in for the year, and so hops every year change year to year with harvest, and so you have to kind of readjust a little bit what you're doing to account for that. And so between that and the actual, between the hops changing and getting that back in line, and then on top of that, with our RO, that's been really fun, is playing with the water chemistry, really, and trying to get the salt profile in line and understanding kind of the balance of how both the salts and the hops will affect your pH and how that pH affects your salt and hops.
Sure.
It's a dual relationship there, and that one will affect the other, but that you also have to understand how that one's affecting the first one in the first place.
Okay.
And so it takes, again, going back to that 5 or 6, 4, 5, 6 times of doing it.
Batches to get it right. Yeah.
Exactly. So we'll have competition coming up, and those first 4 batches coming up to that, I'm looking at it, I'm tasting it, I'm going, okay, needs to be dialed in. Where does it need to go?
Yeah.
And to this beer, it came down to I needed to reduce the amount of bicarb that I was using in the mash. It was adding a brine.
Okay.
That before, with the way the malt was expressing and the hops were expressing, was covered. But now everything's cleaned up, and now it's just showing that brine.
Yeah.
Cut that off. But now I need to get the hop expression forward. How do I do that? Citra's really strong this year. It's really showing in this almost like oniony garlic way that is a little uncharacteristic of it, but when the entirety of the industry is having that same issue, you have to account for it.
Figure it out, yeah.
And so, really, I mean, this is another beer that we double dry hop as well. It's not a single dry hop.
Okay.
We found, I didn't actually want to believe in double dry hops at first, but
that it was just a waste.
I thought it was you're doing more action to get the same idea.
Yeah.
And then then I tried it and did it a couple times, and then you realize that's not the case, and you're like, okay, well, people have their
And when we do experiments, we do blind triangle tests on the end.
Okay.
And we'll just label A, B, C, and 2 are the same and 1 is different. And like, can you tell the difference? And we unanimously picked out the double dry hop as being better.
Okay.
Like, okay, more work, but here we go.
But now
it's a better product.
Data.
And so taking that, we're always applying the scientific method to everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's that again. I'm always when we're making a tweak to try to get it in line, it's one change at a time. If you make 2 changes, you don't know what changed it.
Sure.
Yeah, so you got to mess with the salts. Get where you think the salts are going to work. Now you play with the hops. And that was literally just in the second dry hop, I had 11 pounds of Citra Cryo and 5.5 pounds of Mosaic Cryo. All I did was flip them.
Okay.
And so that just made the Mosaic sing in a much better way. It showed the nuances you want out of Mosaic while also kind of carrying that piney herbal character of Citra that you want too.
Yeah.
And it's those little things that as you sit with a beer more and more, you kind of focus on and you try to develop the nuance of each beer itself.
It's still kind of an educated guess, isn't it? Like that for you were like, I don't know, let's just flip this around.
Let's just do it because and that's a little bit of that brewer intuition too. You've been working with these same ingredients however long, and so you kind of get to know them. But also it's you listen to what people are telling you, you know what the people want, and you just go, people like a little more Mosaic on their
They do.
Right
Everybody loves a Mosaic.
And so it's like, well, if I got to do anything, flip those. We'll lay it more that way. And we went from making final tables, still squeaking in, to gold.
Wow.
So
and part of it, when he just said listening to other brewers as well, it doesn't need to necessarily be specific, but we're having a hell of a time with Columbus because we're dealing with massive amounts of hops. Are massive amounts, like 45-pound bags of hops going in. Mm-hmm. And depending on how the Columbus settled out in the dry hop, we'd get this huge Columbus or there'd be no Columbus. And talking with another brewer, we ended up just pulling the Columbus out of the dry hop because we just want a subtle Columbus character and throwing it in the whirlpool. And so that solved all our Columbus problems right there. So it gave us just enough Columbus that we wanted in there, and then we could work with the other hops in the dry hop without it kind of overshadowing everything else.
And I like your commitment to Columbus, to be honest, because it could, I do think a bunch of people aren't going to tell you, oh man, really love that there's Columbus in there. Mm-hmm. They're not going to necessarily pick it out, right?
Right.
But you are. It's what you wanted in the beer.
Yeah.
So I kind of like that you guys are like, no, we're going to figure out this Columbus. It needs to be there.
Exactly.
And it is there, by the way, on the tail end to me. That's where I get it.
Right. Yeah.
And that was actually, moving it back more into the whirlpool to get it more into the flavor, but less of that aromatic nose. Because the flavor's great. The nose leans a little bit less approachable than you'd want out of the hop. And
I see.
And each hop has that fine range of where you really want to use it. And just as the more you spend with a lot, especially if you can get one lot of hop and really learn that lot.
Sure.
That's where you can really dial that in is sometimes, Citra was great right now in this beer in the dry hop. Something changed, back it off to Whirlpool. It's going to be much more of what we want out of the Citra, and we'll let some other hops later take up the aromatics that we need.
Right.
Most of that has changed now. We're doing hop selection.
That was my next question. So you do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. A predominant theme of award-winning brewers in this studio over the last 3 years, when I ask, hey, what do you think the difference is, has been hop selection.
It's amazing. I guess in a home brewer, you kind of get a uniform thing, or you're not on a big enough scale, but they'll give us 3-4 different cores from a bale, and they are completely different. And you're like, how can this be? It's supposed to be the same variety.
No wonder there was variance of my beer all these years, or whatever. Yeah.
Or if typically, this isn't universal, but typically hops harvested earlier will have brighter, fruitier notes, and then the later they go, the more sweaty, garlicky, oniony they get. And so you're each brewery has its own kind of philosophy of where they want those hops to be. And if you're getting 3 different varieties, they're all garlicky, sweaty, why are you getting 3 different varieties kind of thing? You're trying to pull from each one. Like our Simcoe, we want it to be catty. Our Mosaic, we want it to be sweaty, and then the Citra, you want it to be fruity. With maybe a little resin character in it. But
Yeah, it sounds like once you kind of dial that in, you're able to really make, especially when you guys are so precise. It sounds like you're a precise brewery already. So is Ghost Town. Some of these breweries that we've already mentioned, like they're precise. So why not have your hops that way too?
Right.
Yeah.
It almost kind of take the same effect that water chemistry will have on your brewery in the terroir of your brewery. Pilsners come from the town of Pilsen because that's just how the water was.
Sure.
Once you can develop what you want out of your hops, that's how your brewery tastes.
You get to choose it.
And so, sure, everybody's using Citra, but you have your version of Citra.
Right.
And it plays into it really well in that you can, once you get that established, you can build off the rest of your flavors because you have one established flavor. But when it's always changing all the time, it's really hard to get that dialed in.
Right. Well, you don't have to hear it from me. It's literally actually the best double IPA in America. Do you guys ever think about it that way? I know you have the gold medal, but does your head ever tell you, I just got judged the best double IPA in America?
You do, but it goes both ways. Like you don't get too high on your own supply, right? Because we all have different perspectives on what a different IPA should be, right? Some it should be bigger, more bold, and I got feedback from the GABF that ours was chosen gold because it was so balanced. It didn't.
Nice.
It didn't have.
But that's kind of your thing.
It is our thing, and it's gratifying. But we'll have a different set of judges next time who want to see something bigger, bolder, or maybe even sweeter or what have you. So it's having that feedback was very gratifying for us to know that from that standpoint.
Okay.
But it's right.
But I do hope at least on the night of you had at least one too many pints and you said to yourself, you went to bed knowing, I have the best double IPA in America, at least for the night.
Almost definitely.
Right,
we're not going to let that go. But
you got to enjoy your successes, right?
I probably said fuck yeah, but
we dropped the fuck yeahs, we high fived, we're crying a little bit. No, it's
hell yeah.
But at the end of the day, the day that you decide that you're the best and you can't get any better is the day that you're no longer the best.
Well, don't do that. Just for the short term.
You have to stay relevant, and that means always. Sure. I was telling James the other day, I'm like, in a world of global warming, all the oceans are rising, and we need to keep up. Kind of like that. All the rising tide raises all boats. I'm like, we need to
always go up.
Well, and again, the best breweries that I know, and the ones that win the most and that I enjoy the most, they have all these same philosophies. That don't rest on your laurels. Stay relevant. Keep trying. What else is new? I have to keep learning. So in other words, I'm not surprised about all of these statements from you guys. I just want to make sure you enjoy the moment.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you for that.
Well, we do have time to go full circle, at least with me and you, Craig, which is back to our original show back in 2007. We talked about barrel-aged beer. And I'm guessing, you have to forgive me, it's just been a while, and I've done so many interviews, but I'm knowing myself, I'm assuming I was like, man, this guy does great barrel-aged beers. He's won some medals. We have to talk about this. So you have brought me it's a long name. Old Diablo Slow Burn.
That's correct.
Barrel-aged barley wine. Okay, cool.
So the Slow Burn brand, for those who find it out there, it means it's been aged in a bourbon barrel.
Okay.
And so we had back when we were talking 18 years or so ago, that was Old Woody, and that was aged in a barrel that we spiced with Scotch. So now we're on to bourbon.
Now, bourbon. Okay.
Yes. And we also had a barley wine that we experimented with a cinnamon whiskey barrel. Think Fireball. And barley wine, cinnamon, all that kind of stuff. The caramel characters. We call that Ball of Fire.
Okay.
And so it was so popular, and it was actually surprisingly good.
It sounds good.
I'm like, I'm going to try this. And it worked out really well. So that will be coming out again in probably the next year.
I definitely want to try that.
We've got it aging right now. But here we are with the Slow Burn, the bourbon barrel. This barley wine is 4 years old.
Okay. In one barrel? So this is a blend, or?
Well, let me talk about our philosophy for barley wine. So when I partnered with my current partners, Michael, Dave Lacrosse, and Austin Leslie, he's our vice president of sales. One of the things I said is, this is non-negotiable, is I love barley wine, and I am going to age them for 2 years in these tax determination tanks from the from the brew pub.
So stainless?
They are.
Okay.
So they're 15-barrel stainless unjacketed, and we just throw them in the cooler and let the barley wine age for 2 years. And then at that point, we take some of it and put it in bourbon barrels, and some of it gets released to be drank as is. So that's normally tomorrow is our release for the 2-year-old barley wine previously, and we've already put some of that in the barrel and that sort of thing. So all of our barley wines, if you have it, have been aged for at least 2 years.
Interesting.
And
but some have never touched wood, just stainless.
That's correct.
Interesting.
And that's part of it. My experience is right around 18 months to 2 years, the mouth coating sweetness of the barley wines that we produce converts. And we talked about this in our show 18 years ago. Was that it's still sweet, but it's not mouth coating sweet sort of thing. It's not syrupy, and I don't know or understand the chemistry of why that is, but I just know from experience that micro oxidation or what have you converts the perception of that mouth coating. So
got you. Then when it goes to wood, though, difference. Yeah.
Well, obviously you're going to get a little bit more oxidation, but this, what we're drinking right now, this is still 8 Plato. It doesn't taste that sweet.
No.
But this is also a lesson in IBUs as well. This is an 85 IBU barley wine. We're right on that edge of English versus American. Yeah. But over the course of those 2-3 years, those IBUs will drop down. The barrel aging will thin it, the perception out a little bit. And you get those kind of treacle notes, and
you still get there's bitterness from the wood and from the 85 IBUs. That's like Bigfoot even. That's a delicious beer.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would be so curious to do a side by side, which I'm sure that you guys do. Just the 2-year out of the stainless and then out of this.
It's night and day.
I bet
what you get out of that barrel.
Yeah.
It's also really interesting to look at the year-to-year variance, being that it's only brewed once a year.
Okay.
So you do get to see that variance on our side. And you're like, oh, it's kind of interesting. Just, little fermentation characters, or maybe, the malt expressed in a different way this time, or, that's super hoppy this time, not very malty.
Sure.
And then over time, it ages out pretty consistently, actually.
Okay.
It starts off pretty differently, and then it ages out fairly consistently.
And is it do you only bottle the barrel aged versions, or is it on tap then?
We do have it on tap.
You do? Okay.
At the brewery. So I think, pardon to your viewers, I drank the last goblet last night.
Nice.
Tracy.
just accidentally.
Like, I'll have one of those.
Yeah, and then boom.
I know. It was the last one. They blew it. So I actually didn't get a full goblet, but I'm like, I'll take it. That was amazing.
It's so good. Deep red color. I mean, obviously
mahogany.
Brown too, but mahogany. Still a decent carbonation, right? There's even a little lacing on the glass. That's pretty cool.
We actually keep it at 5 psi over that 2 years, just to keep the oxidation down, and it'll get that super micro carbonation in there, very small bubbles.
That's delicious. It's a good ending, Craig.
Well, thank you very much, Justin.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. All right, folks at home, you can go to Morgan Territory Brewing Company.com? No, MorganTerritoryBrewing.com. I had a little typo in my notes. MorganTerritoryBrewing.com. Go there. You can learn all about it. There's a little story there about how the brewery came to be. You can look at their list of beers that are currently available. You can look at their location list. You can find out all sorts of information, including all their social medias, over at MorganTerritoryBrewing.com. Check that out. And again, hey, just thank you guys for being on the show.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
It's good to have you back. It's good to meet you, and I think we're going to have you guys back in here again. How much time do y'all spend in Pleasant Hill? I'm assuming you're not too much.
It's a bit of a haul. So normally, like if it's after work, we have events. It's a little over an hour drive there. So
sure, okay,
it's a haul.
Well, I'll just keep a look at the calendar of events then and try to catch you over because I can walk there. So
well, my son actually works at Pleasant Hill, so you may see.
Oh, he
there.
does.
Yeah.
So I was looking at your about page, your Meet the Team page, and I saw another Cowles on there.
Yep.
And he's listed as a sort of do everything guy, right?
Well, he started in the brewery, cleaning kegs and doing that sort of thing out of high school. So I actually called the ABC to say, hey, I have a family member working in the brewery. Is this legal? And they're like, oh, no problem. Doesn't have access to alcohol or anything like that. So just cleaning kegs and cleaning tanks and that kind of stuff. So so shortly, and then after the pandemic, he came back. He's over 21 and started working in the tasting room.
So he lives out here then.
He's in college still, so he's going to San Francisco State and lives with us in Livermore. So, kind of in between on his way back and forth, he'll stop by and work a shift here or there.
I lived in San Ramon when I went to San Francisco State, so I can relate to his plight.
Yeah.
Good for him. Good for him. All right, MorganTerritoryBrewing.com. Go check it out, ladies and gentlemen. And, hey, one more thing. Go to 21st Amendment. Check out, they're also a medal winner. Silver medal for the original El Sully this year.
That's right.
It's so cool. That's, I think, it might be my favorite 21st Amendment beer. You can find that in my fridge pretty often. Silver medal for the El Sully. Now they have El Sully Lime, so you can check both of those out. And this is probably not part of my sponsor message because I haven't asked him yet, but I'm pretty sure I saw a photo of like a THC beer or like a hemp beer they're putting out or something.
We used to do a collaboration with them too.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
At your place or
yes,
at 2A?
we did.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Oh, they're still making great beer. Sully, don't get mad at me if I got that wrong, but like one of my staffers sent me a picture of like a hemp beer. You might have to come on the show and talk about it with us. Go to 21st-amendment.com and check them out and thank them for being a sponsor of this show. All right. That's going to do it for us here on this episode of The Session. As always, we've got more coming up for you. I want to thank Morgan Territory, Craig, and James for making it all the way out here. It was a bit of a trek for them, so I appreciate it. And it was good to taste all this beer. I'm going to share some with the Hop Grenade people out there who were here to see you tonight, too. So we'll get your beer out there. If you're local, we also have some of it on tap, including gold medal winning Hoptomic. So if you think you've had all the best double IPAs in the world, you haven't, come check out Hoptomic. We've got it on tap right now. We also have Snapshot, which is a wonderful beer we had today. And we have one of your sour beers on tap. I don't know if you saw that. Lewis texted me and asked if he could order a sour, and I was like, hell yeah, why not?
Strawberry lemonade.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. We always try to keep a good sour on here at the Hop Grenade, so come check that out too. All right, folks. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves and your beer.
The Session is a production of the Brewing Network and brought to you by More Beer. Check them out at morebeer.com. Find more content and live video of this show on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Brewing Network. For sponsorship opportunities and information, please reach out to advertising@thebrewingnetwork.com. To reach our hosts, contact feedback@thebrewingnetwork.com.